In today's video, we are going to push on with programming. This is level 2 foundations in programming. In particular, this is the third video in our mini series of these foundations, and we are focusing on conditional statements. So we're going to talk about conditional statements in a few ways. We will first say, what's a conditional statement? Then we'll do some examples, and then I'll talk about a broader point of what we've been working through in this mini series called control flow statements. Conditional statements are a way that we create decisions in Python, and they're also the code that you probably most likely think of if you're new to programming and you try to imagine what coding might be like. I'll make that clear in a second. Conditional statements are a way to create decisions in Python, and decision making is required if we want to execute some section of code only if certain conditions are satisfied. And that word if is going to mean a lot to us right now. So if something is the case, do this thing. That is an if statement. A very common conditional statement, and maybe the one that even if you've never done any programming before in your life, you've heard of or kind of sounds like quintessential programming language, if else. An if else statement. If something is true, do this. Else, if it's not true, do this other thing. So we've taken our code and we've said, carry on, carry on, carry on, carry on. If this particular thing is true, now go down this way. If this other thing is true, go down this way. Kind of like a choose your own adventure, but we're telling them what the choice needs to be. Them is the computer. We can also make it more complicated. We can do if, else, if, else. If something is true, go do that. If something else is true, go do that. If none of those two things are true, go do this other thing. And we can add as many of those as we want. So here are some examples of if statements. So an if statement means we're evaluating a test expression and then execute it only if it's true. So I'm going to say x is 5. These are so imaginative. X is 5. If x is greater than 4, print x. What are we going to get? Yay, you guessed it. Here's another one. X equals 5. If x is greater than 5, print x. What are we going to get? Yay, you guessed it. Nothing. X is 5. If x is greater than 0, print x, comma, is positive. So now we're going to get 5 is positive. Amazing. Give myself a thumbs up for these winning examples. Let's see some if-else statements. So we're going to evaluate a test expression. If it's true, execute it. Otherwise, execute something else. All right, so x is 5. If x is greater than 0, print x is positive. Else, print x is negative. And again, these are trivial to the point of almost ridiculous, but truly type them out, practice them. This will help you in the long run, I promise you. 5 is positive is what we get in return. Same thing. Now we set x equal to -5. Lo and behold, we get -5 is negative. Amazing. Let's add something else in here. If, else, if, else. So evaluate a text expression. If it's true, execute it. If it's not true and something else is true, execute that. Otherwise, execute something else. So x is 5. If x is greater than 0, print it's positive. If it's equal to 0, print is 0. Otherwise, print is negative. Lo and behold, 5 is positive. We're learning so much about the number 5 in this video. Here's another example. Same setup. 0 is 0. It's hard to think about in some ways. Okay, we do the same thing with -5. Lo and behold, it works. All right, some hopefully ever so slightly more interesting examples. Aha, x equals 4. If x is greater than 4, print x is too high. We're going to see 4 is the winning number. Here's something a little bit more interesting. Again, we're going to now use a range. So for I in range, so there's our for loop and our range. For I in range 10, if I is less than 5, print low, else print high. Ta-da! How fun. So this is pretty simple on its own. Any of these on their own are relatively simple. So if, else, for, while, and we saw the break and continue briefly. These are all control flow statements. So they're all different ways that we can tell the computer to follow the code in slightly more complicated ways than simply top to bottom. They're super important. They're super useful. You will see them everywhere. Without control flow statements, we just have to run our code in order, and our code gets very clunky and very long, and there's a lot of stuff we can't do, like, hey, if this is true, carry on over here, and then once that's done, come on back here. We can start to get really complicated just with these relatively simple control flow statements. With loops, conditional statements, we can execute these blocks of codes conditionally and or repeatedly, which allows us to create potentially very, very sophisticated programs. So these are pretty simple levers. Think of like a marble going through a maze, but these levers really help the marble go this way and help it go that way in a way that otherwise we just have to drop the marble. Is that a good analogy? I'm not sure. I never said that in class, but I got marbles on my brain. All right. That's it. Thank you for being here. Happy coding. Be sure to practice with all of these. I'll see you next time.